The Stoics would teach us to embrace this solitude as a form of personal liberation, a chance to rediscover what is truly valuable. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher emperor, wrote in his Meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This profound statement holds within it the essence of Stoic wisdom. Adversity is not something to be avoided, but something to be transformed. If a person has no friends, they should not view this as a burden or a failure, but as a chance to deepen their understanding of themselves and their place in the world. In the absence of external distractions, one can turn inward and ask, what does this solitude reveal about my fears, my desires, my values? What parts of myself have I neglected, and how can I learn to strengthen them? Seneca, another great Stoic, echoed similar sentiments, emphasizing that true friendship is based not on need or circumstance, but on shared virtue. He wrote in his letters to Lucilius, "A friend is a second self, but when friendships fail, as they so often do, it can leave one questioning the very nature of human connection." If we give of ourselves and others take without reciprocating, does it mean that friendship is nothing more than a fleeting illusion? Is the value of friendship simply in what we can gain from it? Or does it lie in something deeper, something that transcends human selfishness? The Stoics would argue that friendship, at its core, is about mutual growth and the shared pursuit of virtue, not about transaction or benefit. Yet, even in the face of betrayal or disappointment, the Stoics would challenge us to ask, what can I learn from this loss? How can I grow stronger, more virtuous, in the face of these challenges? The story of the boy and the apple tree encapsulates this Stoic lesson beautifully. The boy, once full of joy and imagination, forms a friendship with the tree. The tree gives of itself freely, its apples, its branches, its shade, without expecting anything in return. It trusts that the boy will value their friendship, and yet, over time, he grows distant. He becomes preoccupied with the things of the world, with wealth, with status, with the pursuit of his own desires. When he finally returns to the tree, he is no longer a child, but a man burdened by his own disappointments. He asks for what he believes will bring him happiness: money, a home, a boat. The tree, in its unending generosity, gives all it has to offer: its apples, its branches, its trunk, each time in an attempt to restore the friendship. But the boy, now a man, takes without returning, without truly appreciating the sacrifices made. In the end, the tree is reduced to a stump, and the man leaves again, never looking back. From a Stoic perspective, the boy's actions represent the fleeting nature of human desires. The tree, though wounded and hollowed out by the boy's demands, does not lament or resist. It continues to give, not because it expects to confront a maze of psychological traps and emotional landmines that most people, victims and bystanders alike, could barely imagine, let alone withstand, because guilt, in the narcissist's hands, becomes not only a weapon, but an entire operating system, one that hijacks your instincts for empathy, fairness, and self-examination and corrupts them into tools for your own self-destruction. It starts so insidiously that you might not even see it happening. Maybe you make a simple mistake, maybe you express an ordinary need, maybe you're just not upbeat enough one day, and suddenly, without warning, the air in the room thickens, the narcissist's mood shifts, and you're put on emotional trial for crimes you don't remember committing. Maybe you disappointed them, didn't support them enough, ruined a special moment by expressing a different opinion, or simply failed to read their mind at the exact right moment. And what follows is a storm of blame shifting, projection, and emotional blackmail so sophisticated it feels almost supernatural. You try to defend yourself, to clarify, to apologize for the imagined slight, in hopes of finding peace, but your words get twisted, your feelings minimized, and somehow the conversation always circles back to your failings. If you really cared, you'd never have done this. After everything I've given you, this is how you treat me. You're so ungrateful, so selfish, so emotionally toxic. Phrases that hit with surgical precision to the part of you that wants to be good, wants to be loved, wants to be seen as kind. And before you know it, you're apologizing not just for what you did, but for who you are, desperate to be forgiven for a wound you never inflicted, desperately trying to fix things by sacrificing more, acquiescing more, giving up your own needs and truth in exchange for fleeting scraps of their approval. The narcissist's genius lies in their ability to sense exactly where your emotional defenses are weakest. Maybe you're a peacemaker. Maybe you're relentlessly self-critical. Maybe you grew up believing that love must be earned at any cost. And from there, they build a hall of mirrors in which every disappointment, every failure, every ordinary human imperfection is reframed as an unforgivable attack on their fragile, grandiose ego. Through relentless cycles of martyrdom, nobody has ever suffered as I have, and you just don't care. Manufactured crises. If you don't do X, I'll be utterly alone, broken, ruined. It'll be your fault. Gaslighting. You're making things up. You're too sensitive. You always twist what I say. Silent treatments. Clearly you need to reflect on your attitude before we talk again. They systematically rewire your capacity for self-trust. What used to be ordinary disagreement or the healthy assertion of boundaries now triggers waves of shame, second-guessing, and compulsive self-blame. And when you try to step back, get perspective, talk to friends, or consider the possibility that you're being unfairly manipulated, the narcissist ups the ante, recruiting allies to shame you, spinning tales about your alleged cruelty, or feigning a wounded innocence so convincing that you begin to question the evidence of your own eyes, the memories of your own heart. All the while, deep inside, a part of you begins to believe that the only way to avoid emotional pain, withdrawal, or outright retaliation is to anticipate, preempt, and repair every perceived slight, over-functioning in the relationship, walking on eggshells, losing yourself in the upkeep of their ever-changing, impossible needs. You work harder to be good, more loving, more forgiving, but the more you give, the less you receive, and the more invisible and guilty you become. Your world shrinks around their moods, your identity erodes, and the guilt that once motivated you to be better becomes the barbed leash that keeps you from ever feeling free, safe, or worthy. Sometimes, in rare moments, you may try to confront the pattern, naming what's happening, but this only triggers the narcissist's nuclear-level defenses. You're accused of being the real manipulator, the abuser, the one who's never satisfied, and this reversal is so disorienting, especially if others have bought into the narcissist's version of events, that you start to doubt your own story, your own right to feel pain, your own grip on reality. The truth is that the narcissist's use of guilt is not just about winning an argument or getting their way. It is about colonizing your inner world, making you the guardian of their emotional state, ensuring that your happiness, self-respect, and even your freedom are always conditional on keeping them content and keeping the peace, even if it destroys you in the process. And this is what makes their guilt manipulation so devastating and so difficult to escape. It doesn't just punish you for defiance or mistakes. It teaches you to punish yourself, to anticipate their every disappointment, to make your life an endless apology in search of a forgiveness that will never truly come. Because the actual point is never your redemption, but your subjugation. Recovery begins the moment you see, with searing clarity, this entire machinery for what it is, not a litany of your failings, but a drama entirely engineered by someone who needs you small, guilty, and apologetic to preserve their sense of control and power. Only then, slowly and painfully, can you begin to untangle your real self from the false self